The new Warbond Viper Commandos has dropped in Helldivers 2. This is going to be a quick video looking at the new weapons, armor, boosters, and pretty much everything that arrives in it, and then I'll talk about my thoughts on them. Viper Commandos is a warbond that, as with every warbond, is made up of 3 pages of items. Within these various pages, you have 3 new weapons, a new booster, and 2 new armor sets, alongside the standard variety of things such as capes, victory poses, emotes, super credits, and backgrounds. However, unique to Viper Commando at the moment is also the first new skins that can be applied to things like your mech suits and your Hellpod. So, weapon-wise, you're going to find the AR-23A Liberator Carbine, a secondary with a SG-22 Bushwhacker shotgun, and the new throwable taking up your grenade slot in the K2 throwing knife. Your booster is Experimental Infusion, which will allow your stims to not only provide players with a health regeneration, but will also increase their movement speed and cause them to take less damage for a short while after using. And then finally, the new armors are going to contain the Peak Physique trait. This trait is going to increase your melee damage by 50% and will improve your weapon handling, which essentially means that you're able to aim weapons a bit faster and you're able to get on target quicker. It does not decrease things like recoil. That is a different perk in usually the Fortified where you can find that. Speaking more on the new weapons, the Liberator Carbine, when you compare it to the base Liberator, is going to look very similar. It has the same damage, the same capacity per magazine, and light armor penetration. The 2 primary differences that the description mentions is that it is a significantly higher rate of fire, but is going to come with a higher amount of recoil, essentially turning it into sort of like a big SMG, where it is able to lay down a hail of bullets, but is not nearly as accurate as other assault rifles when you try to use it at long range. Secondary-wise, the SG-22 Bushwhacker is unique as it is a break-action triple-barreled shotgun, and it currently serves as the only shotgun in the secondary slot. It is also one-handed and has alternative fire modes that allow you to fire all 3 barrels. It is quite the interesting gun, and when we hop into a game in a minute, we'll take a look at how interesting this shotgun really is. And then the final weapon is the K2 throwing knife. This is a weapon that takes up your throwable slot, meaning you cannot bring grenades, but instead get a silent weapon that can be used to kill enemies. You do get an increased amount of them compared to regular throwable grenades. However, we'll talk about why I am not a big fan of this when we go and hop into game. Before we do hop into that game, though, let me talk about Experimental Infusion. Now, I, as you can easily see, have not actually unlocked the infusion at the time of recording. However, with it being a couple hours afterwards, there are some other people that have been, and I've been able to experience it in-game that allows me to give it a modest judgment. And overall, I actually really like this booster. I think it's one of the more impactful boosters that is available because using stims is pretty common throughout a match, and that gives it a high amount of uptime. But the ability to just move faster and take less damage means that stims become significantly better at helping you get out of bad situations. If you're pinned by enemies, you can actually kind of stomach to take additional damage, and you're also moving faster to get away from whatever is trying to kill you. I found it to just be very, very beneficial overall, and this is definitely going to be the next thing I personally unlock, because I think it has a real chance of maybe becoming the fourth universal booster. Currently, you have Vitality, Stamina, and Health Pod optimization as the three kind of always take, with a fourth one being optional, but I think Infusion might have a real shot at becoming like the fourth quote-unquote meta pick if players want to be the most optimal. Now that we're in game, let's talk about the weapons. This is the Liberator Carbine. It obviously is going to feel very similar to the base version of the Liberator. However, noticeably, it only has 7 magazines compared to the Liberator's normal 10. On top of that, you'll quickly notice this has a very high rate of fire, and also just having a bit of a spread on its various rounds. You can see the firing pattern gives it quite a bit of kick, and unless you really fight it or fire in very controlled bursts, you're not going to be able to stay on target really easily. The spread is not exactly the best, and that does encourage the CQC nature that the weapon is mentioned being good at. Up close and personal, this can almost be considered a direct upgrade to the Liberator, but if you need that long-range precision, this is kind of where the Liberator Carbine will kind of suffer compared to that of the base one. We then have the SG-22 Bushwhacker. This is the triple-barreled shotgun and has just a lot of unique things going on. So, obviously, it has the properties of a shotgun, but notably, it has very similar to performance and damage to the primary weapon, the Slugger, which means that it actually is able to stagger even medium-sized enemies quite reliably, which can make it a very useful panic button, as being able to stagger those enemies can give you your breathing room that you need to escape or deal with them another way. Now, on top of that, the nature of being a shotgun means that it's not exactly accurate at long range. However, it does have a couple other unique benefits. First off, it being break action means you can reload without losing ammunition, meaning that you're able to use this and just pretty much keep it topped off whenever you have a second. The fast reload also especially helps with this. However, on top of that, you also have the ability to fire and shoot, or shoot and fire with this, so you can, for example, fire one-handed, as with all single pistols. Also usable with things like hard drives and other items that need you to carry them. And on top of that, it also has a very unique mode of all barrels, which allows you to pretty much unload all 3 shots at once. Now, even though it has light armor penetration, the amount of bullets that puts out is able to just overwhelm enemies. And if you're roughly aiming at their vulnerable spot, even medium enemies like Brood Commanders, Devastators, and whatnot will just kind of be torn apart by it. And then finally, we have the throwing knives. You get 8 of them as a baseline, which is double that of the regular grenades. As a weapon, they are, as said, to be completely silent. They make no noise, meaning they cannot alert nearby enemies to your presence. They also have only about an effective range of 10 meters, so as you see, if I throw it, it kind of just peters off after a short distance, and when it hits the ground, you cannot retrieve them. There's no way to currently recover your knives, meaning they are one use, and then you have to resupply or pick up ammo, or, well, grenades, to replenish them. They have overall okay damage. They will consistently one-shot light enemies, but are unable, I find, to reliably one-shot medium enemies. So I actually am not that big a fan of them, because they also lose out on any potential crowd control, and also just seriously lack in terms of speed and the ability of closing things like bug holes. It's just overall a weapon that I find to be quite undertuned at the moment, and there needs to be, I think, significant changes if the weapon is to even be worth using, because as it is, this is a fun gimmick. Maybe as a solo player you can use this, but I find it to be quite unreliable, and just always have wished to have any grenade rather than these. On top of that, I can also show off the armors and the primary perk of it, which is this increased weapon handling. You can see that even something like the heavy machine gun or autocannon, if I had one, would generally be kind of slow to get on target, but now I can relatively bring it up in a speed somewhat similar to that of the regular weapons. It's not one for one, of course, but it definitely feels a lot more reliable. Now, we can also just simply show off the various performance of weapons against some light enemies, as I just hopped into a level 1 mission to show this stuff off, but we can use this as a decent test bed. Let them spawn some more. But overall, I do like the primary guns of this. The carbine I find to be very good at just mag dumping at close range. And with a little bit of trigger discipline, you can easily make it useful at mid to long ranges. On top of that, the secondary bushwhacker I find to be a very nice sort of mini slugger. Fast reloads, the ability to use it to stagger mediums. I find it to just be a very reliable weapon. And overall, I do think those two are quite nice. I've expressed my dislike of the knives, but, you know, overall, I find the weapons of this Warbond to be fairly nice. And I don't really have any complaints for the primaries, even if the carbine itself is maybe not the most interesting weapon out there. So with all that shown off, my thoughts on Viper Commandos is relatively positive from a Warbond stance. Unlike, say, Polar Patriots, which ended up being kind of a flop when it initially came out, or something like Democratic Detonation that was really good and then got nerfed, I don't see Viper Commandos really receiving any significant nerfs in the future, and it will probably be a pretty reliable Warbond overall. Of course, the cosmetics are going to be a subjective part of it, but it is interesting to see skins on various things, and I do think that of them, these are some of the best cosmetics for the simple fact that you can pull out the real guns and show the bugs and bots what you're actually made of. That can be something that maybe helps you incentivize to purchase it. But weapon-wise, I think the carbine is a relatively solid primary. I think the bushwhacker is a standout secondary that does have some nice uses, and the booster is also really good. I do think the K2 throwing knife is on the weak side. Like, actually, it's maybe one of the worst things, and I would say the worst throwable currently in the game. So hopefully that'll get buffed in the future. But overall, I think it's, again, a fairly solid Warbond. I would put it as one that you can definitely consider alongside something like Polar Patriots or Democratic Detonation. Each one having their own pros and cons, but all of them having enough to really be justifiable as a solid purchase. I probably wouldn't put them on the same tier as something like Steeled Veterans, which would probably be my #1 pick for a Warbond, but otherwise, that is my thoughts on Viper Commandos. If you liked content like this and want to see more Helldivers 2 content, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, maybe leave a comment down below your thoughts of Viper Commandos, or do you have any thoughts on the patch that came out that changed a bunch of weapons and, in my opinion, has definitely just improved the game by making stuff feel a bit more powerful and, you know, just making us have a little bit more fun. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for watching the video, especially if you've made it all the way to the end, and I hope you have a good day.